Welcome to Perspectivas, Global Talks on Higher Education, the podcast of the UNESCO's International Institute for Higher Education in Latin America and the Caribbean, IESALC, a global space for dialogue and promotion of higher education for all.
Welcome to today's episode of Perspectivas, Global Talks on Higher Education, where we will be exploring breaking barriers, so education for equality, poverty reduction, and youth engagement. This episode is part of the BIBO Network podcast series, which is inviting young innovators from different countries and backgrounds to discuss youth engagement with the SDGs. I'm your host for today. My name is Anna Weinrich, and I'm part of the Global Student Forum, which is a partner organization of UNESCO IESALC. And I'm happy to welcome our guests. First, a warm welcome to Tendai Kunyelesa, who is a co-founder and advocacy coordinator of the DAWA Network, a youth-led initiative empowering adolescent girls and young women in Zimbabwe. Tendai is a passionate advocate for gender equality, focusing on amplifying the voices of marginalized communities through education and leadership programs. Her work has been instrumental in creating platforms that address the systematic barriers young women face, particularly in access to education. Also joining us in this episode, let's welcome Zalanda Muhai, a public policy expert and member of the BIBO Network, with extensive experience in education reform and youth engagement initiatives in Afghanistan. Zalanda has dedicated her career to advocating for equitable state-led policies that empower young people, in particular girls, in fragile and post-conflict contexts. She's a strong proponent of innovative approaches and to inclusive education and has worked on several grassroots initiatives that link education with poverty reduction and social equity. So today, together, Tendai and Zalanda bring a wealth of knowledge and experience on how education can be a powerful tool for reducing poverty and fostering equitable opportunities. So without further ado, let's just dive right in. And my first question is to you, Tendai, and it is, what does inclusive and equitable education mean? And why is it crucial to ensure equal access for adolescent girls and young women?
Okay, thank you so much, Anna, for your question. So I will start by addressing the meaning of inclusive and equitable education. So firstly, I think education is the education system that values diversity and promotes equal opportunities for all. Secondly, it's education system that addresses the unique needs and barriers faced by marginalized groups, especially adolescent girls and young women. Thirdly, it's the education system that fosters a sense of belonging and social cohesion. And also, and for the part why it is so crucial for adolescent girls and young women, is firstly, it improved academic achievement and retention, and also enhanced self-esteem and confidence. Thirdly, I think better health outcomes and well-being. And fourthly, it also ensures increased economic empowerment and independence. And lastly, amplified voice and agents in decision making. Thank you, and back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much for that answer. That gives us a lot of different perspectives to dive more into later on. Moving on to Zalanda, you worked with state policies in your home country in Afghanistan. From your point of view, what are the bottlenecks and recommendations towards equitable and inclusive engagement of youth in state policies, particularly in the educational sector?
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for the thoughtful questions. Indeed, in the environment that I have worked and I have dug into that, there are a number of bottlenecks and shortcomings regarding the inclusive policies toward educational systems, and addressing these equitable and inclusive engagement of youth in state policies, particularly in the education sectors, require understanding of more systematic barriers and those persistence toward the inclusive educational systems. From my experience working in Afghanistan and other policy making areas, the primary bottlenecks can be youth exclusion, limited presentation of youth in policy making, which leads to the disconnect between policy and their needs. Their needs are less reflected. The second bottleneck is institutional weakness, poor coordination among stakeholders, and gaps in the inclusivity, especially for the marginalized groups. The third bottleneck is gender inequality. Cultural norms and security threats restrict girls' education particularly, and their involvement in the policy process. Economic barriers is another factors that affect the inclusivity of the systems. And from the economic barriers, what I mean is poverty and inadequate resource allocation toward accessing to the education as per the needs of youth. Awareness deficit, lack of youth empowerment programs and relatable rules also limit and restrict their participation. And last but not least, external influences. Sometimes the state policies are more relying on the international or external aids, which misalign their policy with the local needs to be considered. I'm also taking the chance to reflect a bit of recommendations or solutions for this bottlenecks. And these recommendations are more established platform for youth policy engagement, providing them the chance and opportunity to engage, to speak about their needs, how their needs and how their requirements could be addressed. And that's the first solution. The another one is regarding the gender responsive and inclusive policies. We have through the United Nations modules and the charters, we have a variety of solutions and policy reforms for having more gender sensitive policies toward engagement of both boys and girls in the education systems. Another one is increased budgetary commitments to education, focusing more on education, build the country's base for the future empowerment, and the state policies must focus and allocate more budgetary commitments for betterment and improvement of educational systems and area there. And the another one is incorporate vocational trainings for practical skills building. We've been witness of having some vocational trainings in some areas, particularly from the countries that I work in Afghanistan. Vocational trainings play a critical role in decreasing the inequalities or inclusiveness of the education systems. And the last is fostering collaboration between government, international NGOs, or local NGOs that would also foster the betterment of educational systems. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Zalanda, you mentioned economic barriers such as poverty, and I was just wondering, how do you evaluate the relationship between education and poverty?
Yeah, that's interesting questions and need more like kind of elaboration between what is the relationship between poverty and education. Well, the relationship between education and poverty is deeply like interconnected and interrelated and forms a kind of like cycling dynamics. From what I mean, education could play like double rule. First, the rule of two for poverty alleviation, and the second one is as a victim of poverty restrictions. So these are a double role that education play. And if I may elaborate, education first as a tool for poverty or a pathway out of poverty, it could be meant as a key driver for breaking the cycle of poverty. And from the breaking the cycle of poverty, I mean equipping individuals with the skills and knowledge needed for securing the better jobs and increasing the incomes. That would be a word to say. And from this point of view, again, I'm turning to the point of vocational and technical trainings play a tremendous role in this area. For instance, can directly uplift the families by creating immediate employment opportunities. Those that have the vocational and training, technical training skills, they could generate employment opportunities by themselves immediately for the short term, and for the long terms that this on state policies to make the employment opportunities. Continuing to that, it also fosters social mobility, enabling individuals to break free from intergenerational poverty and access improved economic and social opportunities. Intergenerational poverty means transferring the poverty situation from one generation to another generation due to the limited resource allocations. Additionally, education promotes better health outcomes, which is very, very important for the least developed countries, particularly. The population must be in a good health in order to have a good economic activities. And as the educated individuals are more likely to access health care and adopt healthier practices, that is directly or indirectly contribute to the economic productivity and poverty reductions. This is one aspect of education to play as a tool for poverty alleviation. The second one, as a victim of poverty, poverty significantly limits access to education, with many families unable to afford school fees, supplies, or transportation. This could also prevent youth from continuing their education. And this proportion is highly affecting the girls in a local and urban areas. Economic hardships often force children into labor. They're making children to skip schools, skip their classes, and just head toward a very basic and hardship labor opportunities in the market, depriving them of educational opportunities. This is one aspect. Furthermore, schools in low-income areas frequently suffer from resource shortage, inadequate infrastructure, and also poorly trained teachers. These are all from the less access to financial sources and allocation of requirement budget for the systems. So that is also a point to discuss. These barriers could prevent and obviously will prevent impoverished communities from accessing the transformative potential of education. So once again, if I recap, there is a double role for education, both as a tool for poverty alleviation and also as a barrier to education strengthening. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Speaking a bit more on barriers and obstacles, Tendai, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the most significant obstacles adolescent girls face in accessing education, and here particularly in marginalized communities?
Thank you so much, Anna. As I mentioned earlier, I'm from Zimbabwe, and given the background that Zimbabwe is a patriarchal society, so a lot of issues really contribute to the to this issue that we're talking about, whereby adolescent girls and young women are not able to access their education. So firstly, I'll start by talking about socio-cultural barriers. So we may see that early marriages are one of the things that um, adolescent girls and young women are facing, and this thing is also preventing them from accessing their education. And also the childbearing part, many girls and young women are faced to drop out of school due to early marriage and also pregnancy. And also moving on to gender roles and expectations. Girls are often expected to prioritize domestic chores and caregiving over education. So on this one, I think I'll also speak more on first-hand experience. So, like, you know, growing up in rural areas of Zimbabwe, you may notice that girls, they have to prioritize household chores compared to their to boys. So before going to school, you may find out that a girl child is supposed to do maybe some of the chores. By the time she gets to school, she'll be already tired. And also moving on to economic barriers, there is poverty. So many families in marginalized communities cannot afford to pay fees or even provide uniforms and other necessary equipments for their girl child to go to school. Moreover, girls' education is often seen as a low priority when resources are scarce. So we may end up seeing that it's better to prioritize a boy child is education. And also moving to health related barriers, there is menstrual health management. So on this one, there is limited access to sanitary products and facilities. And this thing really affects girls attended at school. If I don't have like the sanitary equipments to use, and also even the school environment is not that favorable to me, I think it's better for me to just stay at home until I'm okay to go to school. So these are some of the significant obstacles that adolescent girls and young women are facing in accessing education, particularly in marginalized communities. Thank you, and back to you, Anna.
Thank you so much, both of you, for the really insightful answers. I have so many questions to ask you, but we have to close this really interesting and important conversation. So, my last question to both of you is about avenues for improvement. So, in your view, how can we effectively amplify the voices and stories of adolescent girls and young women in education, advocacy, ensuring their perspectives lead to meaningful change? And this question is to both of you, so I'd like to ask Zalanda first.
Well, from my point of view, having more inclusive and adequate education systems and policies for in order to consider the adolescents, adolescents, girls, and also women's perspective and needs is providing them the awareness about the value and worth of education, how the education and the literacy role could play in their lives, providing them the information and literacy awareness could leverage their understanding and how effectively the education could not only improve their the lifestyles, but also the impact of education on the all area of their lives, for example, from the perspective of health, from the perspective of poverty, and from the perspective of life systematic approach. that would be the only solutions for having more inclusive and adequate educational systems.
Thank you very much. And moving on to you, Tendai.
Thank you so much, Anna. So from my end, I really think it is very important to document the advocate stories from the marginalized girls themselves. Imagine if we are to engage one of the adolescent girls and young women who is coming from these marginalized areas, and just to hear their voices. Like, even when it comes to solution, we need the solutions that are tailor-made for them. So we would want to see them being engaged in such spaces. So I think from my end, the one thing that I would want is to let us create platforms for these adolescent girls and young women to share their stories, and also let us document these stories of change as much as possible, so that we don't end up documenting something which is being which we are being told by maybe advocates who are already in this space. So we need to also give those adolescent girls and young women who are marginalized this space, so that they can also express their views and also solution to this to the problems that they are facing. Thank you so much, and back to you, Anna.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you, both of you, both Tendai and Zalanda, for your thoughtful contributions on breaking barriers in education to promote gender equality, to reduce poverty and empower youth, and here especially young women and girls. It's clear that with our concerted efforts, we can create educational systems that can truly uplift marginalized communities and give young people the tools that they need to thrive. And to our listeners, we hope that today's discussion has sparked ideas and has sparked motivation for your own journeys in promoting sustainability and social impact. Remember, each one of us has a role to play in achieving these goals. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Perspectivas Global Talks on Higher Education to keep up to date with this series of Youth for the SDGs. Please share this episode with friends and colleagues who are passionate about youth and the SDGs. You can connect to UNESCO IESALC on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on X, and let us know how you're contributing to the SDGs in your community. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, let's keep co-creating a sustainable future together.
We look forward to meeting you soon in this UNESCO's IESALC space, and thank you for being part of our community.